Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. My guest for the next 4 episodes is Paula Krebs. She's the executive director of the Modern Language Association, which offers professional development resources and advocacy for the advancement of the study and teaching of language and literature. Among those resources are, of course, the MLA Handbook, recently published in a significantly expanded 9th edition, and the MLA's International Bibliography, a database of more than 2.8 million records of scholarly resources in the modern languages and literature, and which is celebrating its 100th anniversary. I'll be speaking with Paula about the handbook and the bibliography, what's new with both of them, and how they're uniquely adaptable as resources for information literacy. Speaking of InfoLit, the MLA also publishes the MLA Guide to Digital Literacy. We spoke with that book's author, Ellen Carrillo, back in January 2020. You can listen to that conversation in episodes 106 through 109. Later in this 4-part series, which is sponsored by the MLA, Paula and I dive into the state of humanities scholarship and figure out where the crisis really lies, in our culture or in the humanities. In this first episode, I ask Paula about some of the new elements in the 9th edition of the MLA Handbook. All right, well, Paula Krebs, welcome to the program.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So the new 9th edition of the MLA Handbook is out. It's a much bigger book now, growing from about 100 pages to about 400, which is quite a jump. Can you talk about the details behind that expansion? And, does this reposition the handbook in any way in terms of how it's meant to be used?
Well, the 9th edition of the handbook is meant to be used just like its predecessors were. It's a teaching and learning tool and a reference tool.
Right.
It helps writers assess and cite the sources they consult. And we didn't just make the font size bigger. We actually did, expand a lot of stuff. We know we're working with students, but
no double spacing between the lines. Or
That's right. But the expansion has more support for what job the handbook does. So, for example, to slim down the last edition, we put a few chapters of it online for free. The chapter on plagiarism and formatting a research paper. And we got feedback from teachers who said, it's all well and good, it's over there, but we want everything all in one place. So we're like, okay, that's fine. So we put them back into this edition and kept them online as well. So if people want to consult them online, they can do that. We had a series of email exchanges from one teacher in the UK who was particularly persuasive on this point. And we ended up using her as a reviewer for the 9th edition. So
great.
Anyway, as I said, those chapters are free online still as a public service for everybody, but they're also physically in this edition.
Okay. You've mentioned, the feedback that you've gotten. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you've actually relied on that user feedback and incorporated that into the planning for subsequent editions? What do some of the characteristics tend to be in that feedback, and what surfaces is most important for your readers?
Well, we've got this is a really interactive process, the MLA handbook, and we got from the second an edition is published, we get a steady stream of questions, either asking us for things that haven't been detailed in the previous edition, or posing special cases, or asking us to change things. We get that all the time. We get and we were getting it a lot about in-text citation. So we really expanded the approach to in-text citation so that people could really see how to cite in text and then how to correspond it to your works cited entry for the same thing. Readers mostly, they want their students, it's usually the teachers writing to us, although sometimes it is the students as well. They want their students to be able to find the answers for themselves. So they want us to have them in there to be found. They want the students to be able to credit fairly and write clearly. So, when new kinds of sources come up, they write to us and say, hey, students are wanting to cite this. Can you include this? This is the kind of feedback, that we get a lot of.
How does that typically, is that just the feedback provided to you via email, or how does that come to you?
Oh, all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
Mostly email, but you can ask questions at the Style Center online. So people go to the Style Center site at MLA.org and pose their questions there. Sometimes we get phone calls. Sometimes we
Mm.
get physical letters. I mean,
Yeah.
really, what I love about this is people feel like they own this product.
Hmm.
They really they want it to work for their students and themselves, and they want it to be a live object.
Yeah. Yeah. They're passionate about it. That's
They
for sure.
are, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In chapter 3 of the handbook, there are brand new guidelines on inclusive language, and this is a pretty big deal. And can you describe those guidelines and how the editorial team developed them?
This is it is a big deal. It's an important thing. And talk about reader feedback. We had a student write to us about this, saying how absolutely essential it was for them, personally, that we had a policy, a style on inclusive language that allowed this use of they for singular.
Hmm.
This is a direct reaction. We've, have readers who wanted to. We monitor usage. The culture is always evolving, language use is always evolving, and we monitor usage in media, in social media, in speech, in writing, to watch for shifts and adjust our own basic approach, to what's happening out there in the world. And our readers want to know how to cite inclusively. They want
Yep.
to know, whether to capitalize Black, how to handle an author's name change if that author goes through a name transition, after having published under a different name.
Hmm.
We want to be responsive, and that's not something that we kind of sit in our offices and work out ourselves. That's always in conversation, I guess, with the people who are using the language out there. We consult people who, in the field, both our own members, and people who are involved in the issues, transgender people who are interested in the use of language for themselves. We don't make these decisions in a vacuum.
Right. How does that sort of happen in a practical sense? I mean, does the MLA have committees, or do you have go-to groups that are able to provide you with that kind of
We
insight?
do. Yeah, we
Yeah.
do. We do. We have a committee on disability issues in the profession
Hmm.
who we consult. We have committees on women, gender, and sexuality who we consult, as well as, the executive council. And we have governance groups that forums who do their research in this area, who we consult. So yeah, we have a lot of folks who are already part of the MLA, who can give us input on this. Yep.
Excellent. Good. So there are also a lot more visual examples used to help writers evaluate sources. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about those visual elements, and why they're so effective, and again, what was behind the deliberation there to use so many more of those.
Well, I mean, you said it. They're really effective.
Yeah.
They are very effective, and so if they're effective, it only makes sense to have more of them.
Right.
The thing is, I mean, we think our style's super flexible and easy to apply to new sources that writers are going to encounter.
Hmm.
But there's nothing like seeing, an example of that kind of source right
Yep.
there in front of you to point to. And to be able to draw those circles and arrows around them on the text and point right to what the student is looking for. The visuals, they make a big difference, especially for students. Yeah,
Hmm.
so no, we're really happy to expand that. That's not anything we necessarily would have thought of ourselves. That, again, it comes from the users, it comes from the readers who want to see this stuff. And certainly when you have an online resource, you're infinitely expandable. When you go from 100 to 400 pages, that's a different matter. That's something different to pick up. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So on a lighter note, it sounds like the Manticore woodcut is back in the handbook. Where did it go, and
The manticore.
how did it make it back?
The Manticore disappeared out of the eighth edition. I think that the folks involved in the 8th edition had no idea the deep attachment there was in many of our readers to the woodcut of the Manticore, and so we did actually hear from people about where is the Manticore. So the Manticore is back, and I think it's probably safe to say that the Manticore will never go away again. I find the Manticore a little repellent myself. I shouldn't say it, but I think it's a very strange image, but I understand the attachment. And I think, once you're there with it, there's no getting away from it. So no, the Manticore is here to stay, I think.
Yeah. So it goes to show, like, you actually do listen to feedback and
Yes, we do.
all of it, basically. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I don't want to give a wrong impression. I don't want to say that we do everything a reader tells us to do, but we certainly do consider it and run it, through the entire process and say, all right, what would happen if we did this? What would the effect of this be on that? Because of course, everything that a reader suggests will have knock-on effects further down in the style or out in the style and at different aspects of the style. And so, so it is a careful process of deliberation with all the reader feedback. But we know that our readers are teachers. Many of our readers are teachers, and the ones that reach out to us are teachers, and they're letting us know how this text works as a teaching tool. Because basically, we don't want MLA style to be some kind of, plug it into a citation generator and it spits out MLA style. We want it to be a living thing for students. We want it to be a tool for them to engage in scholarly conversation, and to understand how to credit the rest of that conversation and how to locate themselves in that larger conversation. And so the people who are on the ground helping students understand that are the faculty members and the teachers out there, high school teachers and college faculty members. And so we take their feedback really, really seriously, because we don't want this to be simply a reference work that sits on the shelf. It's a teaching tool, a learning tool for students to use on their own as well. And it's a tool, for reference for writing that they'll do after college as well. Right. It's a way that they learn how to use a style. If they're going to publish anything anywhere, they're going to have to abide by a style. They're going to have to know what's the significance of following conventions like this and why is it useful? And that's what this book aims to make clear.
Great. Excellent. You just heard from Paula Krebs. Paula is the Executive Director of the Modern Language Association. The MLA is the sponsor of this series. Join us next week when we continue our conversation and talk about how the handbook and the bibliography assist with information literacy. And we also get a behind-the-scenes peek at how the bibliography evolves over time.
We have, our staff is made up of multilingual, as you can imagine, specialists with all kinds of advanced degrees in language and literature and folklore and linguistics. And those folks help us to understand changes in terminology, changes in classification and categorization that we need to respond to in the bibliography, because that stuff, it changes all the time. It's a very dynamic, process. So we monitor those changes, whether it's around issues of gender, sexuality, whether it's about other kinds of community titles. So, for example, we're always on the lookout for self-naming versus outsider naming issues in terms for groups and for languages.
If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.